Good afternoon. It's 3 p.m. December 31st, 2023, last day before the new year. So happy New Year to everyone. And today we're continuing our playthrough of Sherlock Holmes, the Dear Holmes series called The Stolen Relic. This is our second letter. Let me check in with the chat, see how everyone is doing. We've got a fairly small crowd today. 10 concurrent viewers, says YouTube, 4 likes. Anna's here. Anna says it's 10 p.m. here. Midnight's very close. Fireworks going like crazy. Okay, let's do a little bit of bookkeeping before we get into today's session. I've been flirting with the idea of doing a live stream overnight as we enter the new year. I've decided not to do it, and I'll tell you why. This channel, playing through these games on the channel with you, has turned into one of the highlights of my free time, and it's very tempting to get on and do a live stream constantly. But I do have other obligations, and I'm trying to get some programming done. I've been working on a new tool for the high and low game system, and I've been working on a tool to help go from plain text or a Google Doc version of the leads for a case into a nicely formatted PDF with some functions to help do things like hide tags and do branches and automatically number leads. So I really need to be disciplined and force myself to not do as much live streaming as I'd like to otherwise. So there'll be no live stream tonight. But we are in the middle of our series playthrough of The Hidden Listener, 12 boxes. And we're going to start that up again this week. I was thinking maybe we could play 3 sessions of it this week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, maybe even 4, maybe even do Saturday, but that's going to depend on whether the regulars who've been playing that with me have those days available. So please do let me know on the Board Game Geek Guild which of those days are available to you. I'll have a little more time after the after New Year's passes to start doing some of this stuff. And I've got other stuff I want to do for this channel as well. I want to do some updates to the intro video. It feels like I should sneak in some updates to that every once in a while. And maybe record a couple more reviews. Okay, so there's that. And related to that, one of the viewers of the channel, Water, has created a poll system so you can now vote on the games you want to join us playing here or you want to see played. If you go to the Board Game Geek Guild for this channel, there's a thread called the Game Queue. At the top of that thread is a link to that voting system. You'll find links to the Board Game Geek Guild on the About page of YouTube. What else? JL says, what is your favorite murder mystery game? Okay, those are great questions for the Board Game Geek Guild or the live updates. I don't want to get too distracted. It's a good question. I have to think about that, so I don't want to get too distracted trying to answer it now. What is everyone doing over New Year's? Professor B says that they play board games from 6 to midnight. And Mark Poole was saying that they watch movies over as midnight comes. It's my tradition to be programming on something over midnight, so that's what I'll be doing. And Anna is about to have midnight where she is in a couple hours. And then I see there's a point about in our case. While I'm waiting for you guys to fill me in on what you're doing for New Year's, let me do a little bit of recap of our case here. So what we've got in this last case is a fairly classic locked room mystery. Well, what does that mean? That means that the heart of the mystery, these were popular in the 40s, 30s, and 40s, I guess. One of the most classic, pure mystery stories. There's something that's happened inside of a locked room, and on first glance, it looks like there's no way anyone could have gotten in or out to perform the crime. So that's our mystery. In this case, we've got a stolen object that's been locked up in this chapel on these private grounds. It's Sir Henry Bellamy's family's precious item, which is supposedly the finger of one of these religious figures. It's got diamonds and stuff. And the wife has convinced him to put it on display for charity. They had the whole ceremony. They brought it into this special, very substantial chapel on the private grounds of the Bellamy family. When they went to check it out in the morning, it was gone. And Watson gives us these questions that we're meant to answer. By what means did the saint's finger make its departure from the confines of the Oakvale Chapel? Who might have taken it? Where is it located? And then, is his life in danger because he feels like there's a curse on the family? Question 2 is almost like giving away something. Like, this sounds like if we're supposed to be able to answer this, that must be a trick. There must be something tricky about where it is. The thief could not have just absconded with it. And we learned a new word, reliquary. Reliquary is a container for a relic. And we're told that the saint's finger that they're talking about that's encrusted with diamonds and stuff is basically a tube which the finger is said to be inside of. All right, so what are we told about what happened? As a brief recap here, she convinced him to display it. He's very paranoid about it because there's a legend that the family is cursed if you ever lose it, and he lost a brother, and the family suffered tragedies and when it was lost before and then it was found. And then there's a local police inspector who's working on the case. He's come, he asks about insurance. Our guy doesn't really answer, but it's clear that our guy, Bellamy, doesn't have that much money. The family's in a bit of financial trouble, doesn't quite answer it as insurance, but he seems genuinely concerned. And then we're introduced to a whole cast of characters here. The footman Jarvis, another footman, Eddie, who's a relative of the wife. Then the wife contacts us. She says she's going to get blamed for this whole episode because she's the one who convinced the husband to show it off. She tells us about more people, the maids, Flora and Jane. She tells us the story of what happened the night before. They brought it in. They had the ceremony. They put it on a pillow. They bring it into the chapel, the Oakvale Chapel. She tells us one thing that struck us as curious, suspicious, that in this very sparse chapel that hasn't been used in many decades, they go and clean it up. She tells us there's a big tapestry. Tapestry feels like you could hide something behind it, maybe even a person. So that was suspicious. And then this part caught my eye too, how the maids bring in a pair of brass candelabras. Now that's suspicious to me because a candelabra, like a candle, has a tube shape. So I feel like you could, if you're looking for how you could hide the item without actually removing it from the room, that might be a good candidate. Then there are windows at sort of the top of this chapel that are 15 feet tall, round panes that are too small for anyone to get through. That's going to come into the story a little bit later. And then outside the chapel, they set up the 2 footmen as guards. They're supposed to stay there overnight. They do stay there overnight, but we learn later that one left for food and one fell asleep with the dog. The dog also fell asleep, who was supposed to be guarding it. The main guy has the only key. He wrapped it tightly around his arm, so tightly that it left an imprint. And he's been drinking something to help him sleep. So there's a little bit of concern that someone could have made a copy of his key. He has some nightmares. One of the maids looks very anxious when he talks about it. We don't know if she's anxious because she did something, or she just doesn't like the story about ghosts. They open up the chapel in the morning. The hinges make these loud groaning sounds, which makes you think someone would have heard it if someone were to sneak in with the key. They open up the thing. The reliquary is missing. He totally freaks out. They confront the 2 guards. One admits he went to go get something to eat, and then says the other one was asleep. We're told he actually plays pranks. So is this possible part of some prank? We don't know. Then everyone gives their alibis. What time did they go to sleep? Where were they? Some went to sleep at 10. Some went to sleep at 11. Then we've got the story of one of the helper boys. How is he described? So our main guy talks about the nightmare he had. The page boy, who's Teddy, lives with his mother on the outskirts of the property. He was polishing silver. He ran home. He cut his knee. Something a little bit suspicious of that. I think a bunch of us were suspicious that that's like, I told the story about how when they bring in the killer to have the interview with them, they look for cuts and bruises on the arms or on the knuckles or a knife cut. And it's very common to see these interviews where the suspect who did it makes up some ridiculous story about how they were moving mattresses in the bushes and they cut their hands. So it is a little suspicious that he's claiming he cut his knee. Like, did he really cut it on the breaking the glass to get in, and then he's made up some other reason why he cut it? He does say he heard some scary cry. No, where does he say about the cry he heard that startled him? Okay, he says his tale of unnatural cries. The page boy. He heard unnatural cries. They think maybe it's related to the nightmare or not. Okay, then there's this weird, interesting thing where Jenkins, one of the footmen, can't find his braces. Those are the things, the suspenders and braces that hold up your pants. And we thought, well, okay, maybe could you use braces to clip on to the item to steal it from the roof without getting in? Then there's the interesting observation about the broken window. They've got a broken window in the chapel. He's not that alarmed by it because it's 15 feet above the ground, too small even for an infant to wiggle through. They look, they do a proper investigation. They find no footprints. They find no place where a ladder could have been propped up against it rained, so they would have seen imprints of it. They don't find anything. So I think the best theory we were working with so far is the idea that a bird has been trained to come in and get it. We're given a little bit of history about the curse. The previous wife died. Okay. So if a bird went in and got it, though, then it's gone. So we wouldn't be able to answer this question, which makes me a little concerned that it's not the bird. But it did make sense that a bird could be trained to go through and get it. They did have some time to prepare. There was some weeks between, I think, when they announced they were going to host this thing and when they actually did. and a bird could go through the window. We thought about the idea of, could someone have gotten up on the roof and lowered down the braces and sort of picked it up and lifted it up? That seems like it would be hard to do, though. But like with some string, could you lower it down like some Mission Impossible thing? Professor B in the channel, I guess I'm going to get to this now. Professor B says, see my comment about the broken window above. There's no mention of broken glass on the floor. It's unlikely the window was broken from the inside. All right, well, I'm not sure I really buy that. First of all, whether you're breaking the glass from the inside or the outside, there's going to be broken glass, right? Like if they look at a door or to an apartment or a window, it's absolutely true that they look where the glass is. If the glass is on the inside of the house, then someone probably punched through from the outside. If the glass is on the outside of the house, someone punched through from the outside. Of course, if you use a glass cutter, that gets reversed. The glass would be on whatever side. There's no mention out here, however, of broken glass. So I don't know if we can assume there was no broken glass. I suppose you have a point that if there was broken glass, if it wasn't mentioned because it didn't exist, then you might guess that the glass would be broken but be on the outside. But then might you not expect them to mention where the broken glass is unless you think it's on the roof? We would still be in that same trouble, though. If you broke it from the inside, then what does that mean? You means you threw the reliquary out the window. That's certainly a conceivable thing. We thought about the idea, what if someone is locked into the chapel, never leaves, but steals it, and then they could throw it out the window to someone waiting? I suppose that's possible. But I think it's a little bit ambiguous about that broken window. I think Mark says the window could have been broken long ago and never fixed. Yeah, that's an interesting thing. We talked about that. It's very ambiguously described. I mean, presumably if that window was broken for decades, wouldn't it be raining inside the chapel? But maybe it's stone floor chapel. Maybe you don't even notice if it's raining. It's a little odd. Perry says, I don't think it was a bird, too random. I do think the other reason I like the bird theory is the cries that the guy hears. Look at this part. His tale, the boy who runs home, he says he left home to his cottage as Jenkins was retiring and saw nothing extraordinary, though his tale of unnatural cries has disturbed half the staff. To me, this feels like it might be a little clue that maybe what he was hearing was the bird cries. Right, as it was being the trained bird. And they talk about this fortune teller, like maybe the fortune teller has got a trained bird. She's part of some like circus crew. So that's still tempting to me. That is my best case. But then where is the bird? Where is the bird? Has it run away with it? And yeah, so that's still my best theory, that it is a bird. But if it is a bird, then it's gone. Then the bird has successfully stolen it. You'd have to break the window for the bird, right? The bird, you're not going to be able to train the bird to break through the window, so you'd still have to find a way to break that window for the bird. That's a little troublesome. Mark Poole says, search the grounds for a nest. Your assumption is it's just like a wild bird who's living on the grounds who decided now's a good chance to get a little treasure. My theory is that the bird has been imported in by the fortune teller as a heist, as part of the heist. So there's no nest on the grounds. She's brought him in. I also suspect that kid, the footman, the page boy, of being involved. All right, so shall we open up our new letter? Let's see if anyone else is doing anything. And it says, I'm suspecting an inside job, maybe an insurance fraud. How do you, if it was insurance fraud, you wouldn't, if you were the owner, and only the owner can benefit from the insurance fraud. So surely if you're the owner, if you're Bellamy and you want to do insurance fraud, you wouldn't have to get a bird to steal it. You would just steal it yourself. Or the bird lives in the mansion. Come on, guys. It can't be just a random bird. The bird is not going to break through the glass unless you think it's old, broken glass. The bird has to be a trained heist bird, is the only way a bird makes sense here. But we shouldn't rule out the idea that Bellamy himself has orchestrated this. Maybe you're right. Maybe he's set this whole thing up so that he can... No, he seems like he believes the case. He believes it's been stolen. He seems concerned about it. Anna says, I mean... Or the bird lives in the mansion. And it says, I mean, it's Bellamy's trained bird who lives in the... Look, if you've got a trained bird in the mansion, people are going to know about this bird. Perry says, how many birds do you know of that have committed crimes? Okay, that is a fair point. That is a fair point. Okay, let's read our paper. Oh, it looks like we're going to get a whole... It looks like today's letter is all from Mercer. Yes, okay. So this is pretty cool. This is a little different than normal. This letter is a follow-up from Mercer, the local constabulary who's been hired to investigate this case. Here we go. Chief Constable H. Hastings, Moss Lane, Godalming, Surrey. 6th day of July. Our first letter was July 5th. This is the day after. Dear Mr. Holmes, allow me to introduce myself. I am Inspector Andrew Mercer. Yesterday, as I believe you know, I was called to investigate the theft of a valuable artifact at Oakvale Manor. You have already been informed of the nature of this strange object. I am told, however, I wonder if you might review my records as you consider this case. I wager you would value information coming from someone less personally involved in the matter, and I am sure you will concur our chances of resolving this debacle are heightened by a united effort. I am a native of Tilford, and I have known of Sir Bellamy since my childhood. Oakvale, now his manor, is situated just between my birthplace and Farnham, some miles south of the latter. He has never been a popular figure. His station in life, to those around here, implies a duty to charity, and he plainly disregards that. I have also known Lady Anne for years. We were playmates as children. A gentler, kinder woman has never lived. It was surprising to learn that Sir Bellamy suspects her in the theft. When I was first called to Oakvale and told of the stolen relic, I expected him to demand a search of his servants and perhaps their quarters. Instead, I was met with a rather precise handful of theories. The aged man is certain that he is cursed, and that Anne has somehow orchestrated the robbery as a means of killing him. If it is not found, Bellamy told me, Efford's curse will be upon me. Once that occurs, there's no telling how it will manifest itself. But one thing is certain, I will soon perish. He paused. The object must be venerated, protected, and the thief must be severely punished. This is an attempt on my life. Hearing this, I grew doubtful of both his sanity and his own motivations. So I questioned him as much as I could before interviewing others and inspecting the premises, including the site of the alleged theft. My work brought forth a number of telling details. My first subjects, after speaking with the Bellamys, were the lads, Jarvis and Edward, who had been assigned to guard the treasure the night of July 4th. Both claimed they saw and heard nothing until I questioned them more aggressively. It was then Edward who confessed that he had fallen asleep at the door to the chapel, but only because Jarvis left me alone to go have some bread and cheese. He didn't even bring me any when he came back. Jarvis turned red in the face and swore at his fellow footman when he said this. Even from a short distance, I was able to sniff Jarvis's breath, alcohol, and see the broken blood vessels in his nose. When I told him his breath smelled of spirits, he drew back and said, "Oh, what of it? You're not the only one on sentry duty with a half-wit. You're not the one on sentry duty with a half-wit." Oh, very well, I thought to myself, and simply thanked the two. My probing later uncovered a bottle of scotch nearly empty in some shrubbery in the woods behind the chapel. I know from Anne that Sir Bellamy is not a drinking man, so I presume the bottle is in fact the bread and cheese that Jarvis told his associate he was fetching. The footman must be grateful that Bellamy's senses are half failing him. Following my conversation with the guards, I was led to the scullery, where I spoke briefly with the butler and his wife, the cook, Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins. They are a quarrelsome pair and had nothing significant to contribute, though the butler wished to report another robbery, that of his best pair of braces. As he is a man of ponderous girth, this is no doubt a hardship for him, but I informed him it would not be a case I would undertake at present. On hearing this, he lowered his voice. I do not wish to insinuate anything or incriminate anybody, but I feel as if I should mention this to you. Mr. Jenkins leaned close to me. The night before the Saint's finger was taken, most everyone retired fairly early, the rain and all. But I was awake until late, and it seems I wasn't the only one, he hissed. While I was making myself tea, just after retiring, must have been 11 or so, I was in the kitchen, and I suddenly heard a dreadful plop, plop, plop. So I armed myself with the biggest ladle I could find and poked my head out the door. Mrs. Jenkins held onto his arm as he spoke. Lo and behold, Flora, drenched but oddly happy, clutching a croquet ball in one hand and a small rag in the other. She was quietly trying to dry the path behind her as she crept to her chamber. Now, I'm not saying she did anything awful, but you must admit it was a mighty unusual sight. According to Mr. Jenkins, she proceeded to her quarters and remained there until morning. It is strange, is all, don't you think? My braces going missing just as Flora starts to act strangely. I responded, indeed, I'll be sure to inquire, then made my leave to examine the chapel. All right, well, this is pretty huge. Although I'm vaguely familiar with Oakvale Manor, I had never set foot in what appears to be its loneliest structure. It's a sad place, lacking decoration except for a stone altar, 2 wooden benches, a pair of brass candelabra, and one faded but quite substantial tapestry on the eastern wall. No stained glass or murals relieve the gloom. The door is the only entrance and exit, save for 6 leaded windows across the eastern and western walls, but those are high above, perhaps some 17 feet from the ground. Despite a very careful inspection with my magnifying glass, a procedure I have learned from studying your methods, I detected no evidence that the door had been forced open recently, nor had the lock been tampered with in any manner. One small window on the western side was broken, apparently between the time they placed the Saint's finger in the chapel and the time it was stolen. The other windows were all intact. I wondered if someone might have climbed in through the window and taken the relic, so I had Mr. Jenkins fetch us a ladder and inspect the window from both within and outside of the chapel. Most importantly, I observed that the window was not much larger than a serving dish. Not even a thin child could have squeezed through, especially with much of the shattered glass still sticking up from the sill-like vicious teeth. Beyond that, there was no hint of blood or footprints, nothing indicating passage through the window. Nor was there any dubious damage to the stone walls beneath the windows on either side. That is to say, I do not think anybody attempted to scale the chapel to reach the window. After abandoning the chapel, I spoke with the maids, as Lady Anne had informed me that they cleaned the place prior to the saint's finger being placed on the altar. Both are young, between 18 and 20 years of age. One, Jane, is unusually tall. She competes with the butler in height, and he, in turn, is at least 6 feet tall. I started by asking if either of the two had been alone in the chapel at any point in the last week or so. "No, sir, we always work together," said the older one, Flora. I then asked if they had found anything unusual while preparing the chapel for the ceremony, and Jane answered, "Oh, a lot of dust. We had 20 years of cobwebs to clean out." Flora nodded and spoke. "Oh, according to the Mrs. Jenkins, Sir Bellamy hasn't used the chapel since his first marriage." The taller one paced as she added, "I was afraid we'd find something dreadful," she continued, "but nothing. It was rather dull. We did find some glass the day the relic went missing, and a few leaves. But the worst work was beating out that tapestry. I am still sneezing." She gave a nervous glance at Flora, and she fixed her mess of orange hair. "My face, it was so covered in dirt I could barely see. Had to wash it out before we could finish." "Then you were not always together," I observed. "Oh, she was only gone for a minute," Flora said firmly. "I swept up the leaves while she was away." Jane agreed. "But you saw no footprints, no marks where someone might have entered?" They shook their heads. Then Jane spoke with a timid squeak. "Oh, don't you think it could have been Saint Efford himself who took it? His spirit, I mean. Don't you think he's been unhappy all those years in heaven? You can't play the harp without all your fingers, Flora." "Oh, what a silly goose you are," Flora snapped. I had to concur, and as I considered my subsequent inquiry, I heard a long whistle outside and was reminded of the Bellamy's hound. "The mastiff outside," I said. "I presume him to be a good watchdog. Did he bark that night or alert you to anything in the days before the artifact vanished?" Jane said, "No, Then she shot a glance at Flora. "Well, everything has been quiet here for a week. No visitors." "And when you've been off to town on errands, you've seen no one lurking outside the grounds or anything like that?" They shook their heads. "And there are too many of us not to notice a stranger," said Flora. "Jane and I, along with Eddie, Jarvis, and Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins, we have quarters in the house. Even Teddy resides just down the hill in a cottage with his mother. They barely get by." Knowing what I know of the manor, I would have to agree with her assessment. A stranger would have been noticed by someone within moments of loitering, unless they were entirely concealed. After this, I dismissed Jane and asked Flora if she would speak to me in private for a moment. I asked her of what Mr. Jenkins had told me, and she did not hesitate to answer. "Oh, poor Jenkins, his age betrays him," she laughed. "He must be thinking of a different day is all. It rained a lot last week, and see, there was this one day the staff had been playing games on the lawn. You can ask him." And I realized very late that we had left some things outdoors. I knew Sir Bellamy would be cross if he found out, so even though it was the middle of the night, I ran out to gather it all. This I noted. Afterwards, I took another quick walk around the chapel, where I encountered the butler again, and later the page boy. The ground around the chapel had been badly churned by Sir Bellamy and his clumsy footmen, but I found no evidence that somebody attempted an entry, by means of ladder or otherwise. I thought perhaps a thief might have climbed the oak standing next to the building to access the roof, but a sturdy study of its branches assures me that it would be far too risky of a leap. Mr. Jenkins, who was now tending to the hedges near the chapel, saw me staring at it and offered to bring me a ladder again. "Oh, here you are, sir," he said only minutes later, positioning it. The slate roof was sound and sturdy upon inspection, though I gave the butler a fright when I slipped past one of the ladder's rungs on my descent. This occurred precisely as Teddy, the page boy, strolled out of the chapel, and he was quick to give a hearty ha-ha. Just as quickly, Mr. Jenkins scolded him. "I told you to keep out of there, boy." The page boy crossed his arms. "I was having another look, sir, to see if I could find a clue for the detective. What if there's a reward?" I grinned at him. "And did you find anything?" He kicked the dirt. "No, sir. I found nothing but a feather, which I put in my cap." He doffed said cap and showed it to me eagerly. "You know, they say that magpies are signs that spirits are nearby. Jane told me so. She said," is this the boy talking? "She said there are lots of sorts of spirits. Could it be that a shade took the relic?" Oh, this is the boy talking. "You know, they say magpies are signs that spirits are nearby. Jane told me so. She said there are lots of sorts of spirits. Could it be, sir, that a shade took the relic?" I could not help but let out a laugh in response. One should expect no more from superstitious servants, I suppose. I told the boy to run along, and he skipped away to a boulder between the house and chapel, where he sat and remained scribbling on a pad. He's a little detective. For my part, I made my way to Sir Bellamy's study to announce the conclusion of my interviews and my departure. Hearing me approach, he called me inside and asked that I shut the door behind me. He seemed agitated, ashen. After I shut the door, he called me to his side and thrust a medicine bottle into my hand. "How strange that I have slept so deeply this week," he said, "and I have terrible dreams. Take this and have the chemist test it." It was a bottle of Ayer's sarsaparilla, which is now in the hands of my friend and an excellent chemist, Charles Withern. If there's anything amiss with it, you will be the first to know after me. With the bottle in hand, I asked Sir Bellamy where he had obtained it. "My doctor," he croaked, "said it was a healthful tonic and that it would make me feel more vigorous." As I examined the bottle, he added, "I keep it in my chamber always. Only my wife knows where it is." He then insisted that I speak with Lady Anne, as well as the footman, Edward. I informed him that I had already interviewed both, and that I had all the information I would be needing at that stage. He demanded again that I interrogate them, noting that time was of the essence. "I am most aware, sir," I told him. Then, taking inspiration from the page boy, I offered him the idea of posting a reward for his treasure. He begrudgingly agreed, but ended our conversation abruptly shortly afterwards, when I broached the matter of the Saint's Fingers insurance. This, of course, compelled me to visit another place prior to returning to the station. Upon leaving the manor, I called upon Sir Bellamy's solicitor in the village, Mr. Connor Marlowe, and inquired whether the relic was insured. Knowing he had no legal obligation to answer me as of yet, I was reluctant, but Marlowe was pleased to speak to me. He said, "Sir Henry Bellamy has felt no obligation to pay his bills of late, so I feel no obligation to harbor his secrets." Saying those words, he rummaged through a cabinet and snatched a piece of paper, handing it to me. "The Saint's Finger is insured for nearly £2,000, good sir." I am finding it difficult to believe that Bellamy is truly angry or in fear of his life. Rather, he must act offended, lest the insurance company fail to pay him. Oakvale is a dilapidated property in great need of repair, and Sir Bellamy is similarly past his age. If he can no longer afford to fix broken windows or replace tattered tapestry, then perhaps his curse comes from a more earthly origin. And there the case lies. The Oakvale Chapel, I have no doubt, was locked through the night on which the saint's finger vanished. No person could have entered it unless through the door, which was supposed to have been barred by both Edward and the mastiff until the early hours. The other footman, who is not fond of his fellow guard, was willing to confirm this. Still, I wonder if therein lies the solution. This other footman, Jarvis, may be lying about more than his penchant for Scotch. Further, Sir Bellamy's squawking about the curse seems to me like madness. I am a man of science, Mr. Holmes. I do not ascribe to his or his servants' superstitions. Rather, in light of his statements against Lady Anne, I theorize. The old sinner might be trying to endanger his good wife's name and garner a precious sum from his insurance company, all in one swoop. Please come to Oakvale if you can, or at least tell me if my theory of the case is the correct one. I hope to put this nonsense to rest soon. Sincerely, Inspector Andrew Mercer. Okay, so we've got some very interesting developments. But first of all, very fun to get a letter from the inspector, like a third party. He knows the wife, he trusts her. Okay, well, I trust him. I mean, I don't think he's right about everything, but I also agree that it's not the wife. Okay, one of the footmen we know is a terrible drunk. So he was off duty, left the place alone drinking, so he's can't be trusted. The other one fell asleep. All right. He found the bottle. All right. Then the cook and his wife. Nothing special there, but he still can't find his braces. They're still missing. Okay. And then he tells us a very suspicious thing that he saw. He heard plop, plop, plop. Okay, so what is he hearing? A dreadful plop, plop, plop. He goes out, and it's Flora, the older... Is she the older maid? I guess I did her voice as the older one. I'm not sure she's the older one. He sees Flora, drenched, but happy. She's got a croquet ball in one hand and a rag in the other. Trying to dry the path behind her as she crept to the chamber. So she's trying to hide the fact that she was out there. Very suspicious. Now, a croquet ball you could use to break a window. Is it tied to suspenders and braces so you could throw it through the window and then pull it back without leaving any evidence? Is that what's happened? You throw it through the window? Or as a slingshot, says Professor B. Okay, I have a question here. Braces and suspenders. What are braces technically? Are they the whole thing with the elastic and the clip? Or is it just some specific part of it? I think it's the whole thing. It's like suspenders and the clips. Those are the braces, right? Well, it's raining out, I think is what they're saying. Anna says, what's with the water? I think she's drenched because she was out in the rain and it rained that night. And I think she's leaving a trail and that she's trying to cover up the trail of dripping water on her. All right, so I think she's gone and broken the window is what I think. Now, let's see. He describes the broken glass again. He gives us a little more detail, though. No sign that the door has been opened. It was broken that night. He wonders if someone could have gotten in, and he looks at it, and he sees it's clearly like no one has even... The broken glass has got a hole in it, but it's like shattered spikes of the glass are still there. So someone didn't even knock out the glass. It looks like something could have gotten thrown in or thrown out. But yeah, so clearly no one got in through this. Maybe a bird could have, though. All right. So the teeth of the broken glass are still there. No blood on them. No one got cut. No footprints. No sign on the stone that anyone tried to climb up. Okay, now let's look. Okay, all right. So they're both young. 18 and 20. Okay, so they're both young. I've been reading one as an old woman, but they're both young. And Jane is the tall one. Okay, let's try to remember that. 6 foot tall. And Jane was our one that was creeping around, right? No, Flora. Okay, Flora is creeping. All right. So, and she's the older one. Okay, now they separate here. This is important. They work together cleaning it. They're never apart, but then they reveal they were apart. Okay. They did find some glass the day the relic went missing. We did find some glass the day the relic went missing. And a few leaves. Are they saying they found the glass beforehand? Or afterwards? Afterwards. The next morning. They go, in the morning they come, the relic's missing, and then while they're cleaning up, they did find some glass. And some leaves. The tapestry was full of dust. She gave a nervous glance at Flora. As she fixed her mess of orange hair, my face was so covered in dirt. So then they reveal that they've been separated. She says, Flora says, Jane was only gone for a minute. I swept up the leaf while she was away. Not always together. Okay. I swept up the leaves while she was away. Jane agreed. So Jane goes away. Flora stays and sweeps up the leaves. She didn't see any footprints. And then Jane says maybe the saint came and got it. Talk about the watchdog, no visitors, and a long talk about how no visitors could have come without being spotted. I'll tell you what I had a thought about. Let me see what the channel says, and then we'll see what I thought. Okay. Flora had a plausible reason for being outside at night. All right, we're gonna get to that. The boy found a feather. Yes, we haven't gotten to that yet. All right, so Rob says, did she attach the ball to the suspender, throw it, so break it and retrieve it? Well, that was my theory. I had a thought. My thought was the idea that the finger is still in the chapel, in the candelabra, possibly, but you have to break the window to make it look like it was stolen that way. so that you could then retrieve it. So what I wanted to see is who brought in the candelabra, because that's my theory of how they're going to smuggle it in and out. So I want to see in the first letter what they say about the candelabra. Tapestry has been there for the whole time. The girls had swept and dusted every nook and had brought in a tall pair of brass candelabra. So the girls brought the candelabra. All right. It's just a matter of, do they have the opportunity to hide it before they close it up? Otherwise, my theory doesn't work. Okay. And then the other thing that's kind of significant is that she's happy. All right, let's hear how she claims what happened. Talks to the two girls. You've seen no one when you went on errands. They all live in the house. And then he wants to talk to Flora privately. He confronts her what Jenkins said. And she says, no, he's just confused. It was a different day that this all happened. It rained a lot last week. They were all playing outside. I cleaned up. That's it, at the middle of the night. This is all seems like a huge lie. Okay, then we talk to the page boy. All right. He sees us. Could anyone have gotten through the roof? Really doesn't seem possible. And then the kid is turning into a little mini Sherlock Holmes. And then the guy says, keep out of the, whatever it is, the shack, the shed, looking for clues. And he found a feather. That's some little evidence of our bird theory, or is it just trying to trick us into the bird theory? I mean, finding a feather is not a crazy idea. But then, as a mention of a magpie, so are they saying that this is the feather of a crow, which increases the likelihood you could train a crow to do something quite fancy, like steal the relic? And then he talks to Bellamy. He's very suspicious that someone's trying to poison his or make him fall asleep. He gives it to us, to the inspector, and the inspector is going to have it analyzed. And then the inspector suspects Bellamy, and he says it's been insured for $2,000, so that's his motive. All right. So I think I want to see the last details of the placing of this thing in the chapel again. I know after they go in and find it missing, they check and look for hidden passageways. They don't find any. Let's look at this again. Well, let me check in with the chat. Then I want to read some of this stuff. Okay. Practically speaking, says DJ Moneycut, it would be pretty hard to attach suspenders to a ball. Yeah, that's true. Perry says candelabra could be a solution. Also, Bellamy may have removed the finger before it went into the chapel so he could claim the insurance. Has the chapel been locked as a crime scene since the inspector's visit? If not, anyone could have gone in. Yeah, I think anyone could go in. In fact, we know the girls were cleaning up afterwards, so we know the girls have been let into the chapel afterwards. Bellamy was against the idea of putting it on display from the beginning, so it seems unlikely he orchestrated the theft. I agree with that. I want to see more details of what the last time it was seen. They clean up. They see the tapestry where something could have hidden behind the tapestry. A bird, a person, maybe probably not a person, but a bird, surely. Okay, so let's see this thing. They have a ceremony. They take it from its usual place. She polishes it. They all go marched to the chapel, even the dog. Jane had earlier presented Jarvis, our first footman, with the pillow, which he carried high above his head. Remember, he's 6 foot tall. He's carrying it high above his head, so no one can see what's on the pillow at this point. They played the trumpet. They marched it in. But then he laid the satin pillow upon the altar, and we watched as my husband delicately placed the relic in its place of honor. Okay, so it sounds like when they're carrying the pillow, it's not on there yet. They put the pillow down. He puts the relic on the pillow. How the saint's finger twinkled. So they all see it at that point. The light's coming in. We sang a hymn and departed. My husband locked the door, storing the key in his pocket. So it sure sounds like they locked the door and they can see it basically on the pillow. So it had to have been there when they left. All right, now let's see the scene when they open it. They go back. They see the guard. They're all upset. Jane is nervous, not Flora. The two of them are going to go out and look at it. The guards are there. The dog is there. They salute. He opens the door. The hinge is grown. We four filed in. So at that point, the maids are nowhere to be seen. Atop the pillow is nothing beyond a small depression where they placed it the afternoon before. Still seems like a bird theft, but with Flora involved in breaking the glass with the croquet ball to let the bird get through. But then where is it? Where is it? If we had to answer these, we would say something like this. If we had to guess right now, the way they got it is in the still of the night, she tied a string, basically, suspenders to the croquet ball, threw it through the window, and then retrieved it. That broke the window. Then the trained bird flies in, grabs it, brings it to her, and it's in her possession. That would have to be our best guess, and that's why she's happy it worked. So if we had to guess where it is, it's not in the candelabra. It's in Flora's room, and his wife is not in peril. And no one used the key to get in. But then it's a trained bird. How does she get this trained bird? Maybe she's working with the someone at the fortune teller. And it says, why did they put the finger there a day early if Bellamy was so anxious about it? That's a good question. Well, maybe you could look at it like this. What allows you to say they put it there a day early? I mean, they put it there and they intended to keep it guarded the whole time. So there's no early or late. He may have put it a day before the opening started, but why would you? He doesn't want to leave it to the last minute. So I guess the piece of the puzzle that we may have gotten today is that our theory was and still is that a bird took it. But then we had this problem of how does the bird get in the window? Because a bird is not going to throw itself through a leaded glass window, even a trained bird. So there had to be some way that someone broke that glass so the bird could get it. And our theory now is that the girl threw the croquet ball through the window in order to provide an egress or ingress for the bird. Maybe the bird was there behind the tapestry the whole time, by the way, and it only had to fly out with the finger, not even fly in. Maybe the woman puts the bird behind the tapestry, leaves, then at night she throws the croquet ball through the window, and then the bird flies out. I guess it would be one less thing you'd have to train the bird to do. I still like it. The only thing that I'm thrown by is how to answer this question about where is it. I guess we would have an answer that it's with Flora. And the candelabra is just a red herring. DJ Moneycut says, why is he so determined to put suspicion on his wife? Well, he's not determined to put suspicion on her. He is suspicious of her. Because you would be too if your wife was like convincing you to put this thing on display and you're like, I can't, it's dangerous. My life's in jeopardy, it's cursed, and she like convinces you to do it, and then it shows up disappeared, and she's the only one who knows about where your sleeping pills are. I think suspicion naturally falls on her. Macon Leary says, if the solution does include a trained bird, a cricket ball magically attached to suspenders, it'll be everything I dislike about locked room mysteries. I don't know. I don't mind it. I wouldn't mind a better I wouldn't mind some backstory to the trained bird. Like, you can't just go catch a crow and train it in a couple days. You have to have a trained bird that's been trained for a while. But there's nothing that says that hasn't happened. I mean, these girls have not been working with them for that long, right? They're two young girls. Where did they come from, these two girls? They're Lady Anne's. Okay, let's see. My maids, Flora and Jane. She tells them to clean it. It's not like they've been working there for that long. And where's the thing about let's see. The girls cleaned it. The maids. Jane, one of our maids, looked anxiously to Flora, the other. She's trembling. All right, these two maids are in on it together. Do you think there are spirits in the house, Sir Henry? Where is the part about the fortune teller? Okay, the staff are talking about what they did. Let's read this again. Flora says she goes to bed at 10, heard nothing. Jane also went to sleep and slept peacefully. He heard the unnatural cries. Okay, let's see. Jane began to cry. See, it's what the medium told us. I won't stay in the manor if it's filled with shades and wraiths. Then Flora holds her hand. Stop being a flighty fool. Me and Jane, we went to the fair last week, and the fortune teller, she was trying to frighten us, I'm sure. Being so close to Black Lake, Miss Fortuna says it's a powerful energy. I don't know if it's one or both of the girls working together, but I think one of them tipped their hand with that croquet ball. The realistic solution is it was taken for money. Only Henry and his wife could pull this off and hope to get away with it. You guys are talking yourself into being angry at this case if it's a bird. Birds that can be trained to do some pretty extraordinary stuff. So I'm not going to be upset if it's a bird, but I would like... What? So one theory is it's birds. Another theory is that... What? That it's still in the chapel, but you'd have to have some... They lock the door with it there. They open it up and they see it's not there. So I don't see how it can still be in the chapel. DJ Money Cut says, I'm curious to find out if Bellamy was drugged. It's very hard for me to see someone going in the front door. If you went in the front door, you wouldn't have to break the window. You wouldn't have to... It would be too risky to try to make an imprint of his key and go in the front door. I just don't see how they could have gotten away with it. So I think that's all red herring, drugging him and getting his key. It does feel to me like it is the bird. I'd like to know a little bit. I'd like to call in these two maids and find out what their previous employment is and if any of them worked at the circus. Okay. Well, the plot thickens. I'm curious to see where it's going. It looks like the channel is dividing a little bit. Half the channel is angry at the idea that it's a bird, and half the channel is coalescing on a theory involving a bird, a trained bird. I'm in camp trained bird. That means I think there's a trained bird involved, and I'm not unhappy about it. If you have any doubt at what the birds are capable of, you could just go on YouTube and see some of these smart birds doing some very fancy things. Okay, we're going to end it here. Thank you for joining me on New Year's Eve. Tomorrow will be the first day of 2024. Kind of exciting. I'm thrilled to have this channel, to have friends out there to play these games with. We'll talk in the days of the new year about our plans going forward. Maybe we'll figure out what games people want to play. Do stop by the Board Game Geek Guild for this channel. Take a look at what games are available to play. Let me know what games you're most interested in seeing. If you're playing the Hidden Listener with me, that will continue this coming week. Maybe Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I'm not sure. I hope all of you have a wonderful new year. Let me know what your plans are. I'd like to hear about it. If you are catching up on this offline, not joining us live, and you have a different theory of this case, post it in the comments, and I'll see you all next time.